The blood seeping through her skirts had already dried dark and crusty by the time Rose Zimmerman stumbled into Marfa, Texas on that scorching afternoon in July of 1883. Her face pale as bleached cotton, and her hands trembling so violently she could barely grip the hitching post outside the general store. The pain had started 3 days ago as a dull ache in her lower abdomen, but now it felt like someone had taken a branding iron to her insides, twisting and burning until she could barely breathe without whimpering. She had ridden from El Paso alone after her aunt died suddenly, leaving her with nothing but a horse, $60 in coins, and the knowledge that she needed to reach her cousin in Fort Davis before the pain or the fever killed her first. The druggist's shop stood between the saloon and the blacksmith, its painted sign reading Morrison's Apothecary and Medicines in fading letters that had been beaten down by West Texas sun and wind. Rose pushed through the door, the bell jangling overhead, and immediately gripped the counter to keep from collapsing. The shelves behind the counter were lined with brown bottles and tins, and the smell of camphor and alcohol made her already queasy stomach lurch. The druggist, a thin man with wire spectacles and a suspicious expression that seemed permanently carved into his features, looked up from his ledger and frowned. "Help you? I need laudanum," Rose said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, for the pain." The druggist set down his pen and studied her with eyes that seemed to catalog every detail, from her disheveled dark hair to her trembling hands to the way she swayed on her feet. "You got a prescription?" "No, but I have money," Rose said desperately, fumbling in her pocket. "I can pay whatever you ask. Please, I just need something for the pain. It is unbearable." "I do not sell laudanum to women without a prescription," the druggist said flatly. "Too many of you get dependent on it, use it for female hysteria or nerves or whatnot. Find yourself a doctor if you want medicine." "The nearest doctor is 2 days' ride," Rose said, her voice breaking. "Please, I am not hysterical, I am sick. There is something wrong inside me and I need help." "Should have thought of that before you came out here alone," the druggist said, returning his attention to his ledger. "Decent women travel with family or husbands. Whatever predicament you have gotten yourself into, I want no part of it. Good day." Rose felt tears of frustration and agony burn behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had cried enough these past few days, alone on the trail with nothing but the stars and her horse for company. She turned to leave, but her legs gave out halfway to the door. She caught herself on a display of patent medicines, sending bottles clattering to the floor as she sank down, the pain in her abdomen so fierce she could not hold back the cry that tore from her throat. The door opened behind her, and someone said, "Easy now." Strong hands caught her before she hit the ground, and when Rose looked up through eyes blurred with pain and unshed tears, she saw a man crouched beside her. He was young, maybe 26 or 27, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of river stones, gray-green and steady. His dark hair needed cutting, curling slightly at his collar, and he wore the dusty clothes of a working cowhand, trail-worn denim and a shirt faded from many washings. But what struck her most was the genuine concern in his face as he studied her. "What happened?" he asked, his voice low and calm. "Nothing that concerns you, Vincent," the druggist said sharply. "Just some woman looking to get herself doped up on laudanum. I told her no." Vincent Rourke ignored the druggist entirely, his attention focused on Rose. "You are hurt." Rose nodded, unable to speak past the pain that had her doubled over. Vincent looked at her face, at the pallor and the sheen of sweat on her forehead despite the dry heat, and then his gaze dropped to where her hand pressed against her abdomen. His jaw tightened. "How long have you been like this?" he asked gently, 3 days, Rose managed. It keeps getting worse. I just need something for the pain so I can keep riding. I have to reach Fort Davis. Vincent looked up at the druggist, and the easy calm in his expression disappeared, replaced by something cold and hard. Give me the laudanum. I told her no, the druggist said. And I do not appreciate you coming in here and making demands, Rourke. You work for your brother, not for me. I said give me the laudanum, Vincent repeated, standing up slowly. He was tall, over 6 feet, and there was something in the way he moved that suggested he knew exactly how to handle trouble. I am not asking again. The druggist's face flushed. You cannot come in here and threaten me in my own establishment. I will report this to the sheriff. You go right ahead and do that, Vincent said evenly. While you are at it, you can explain to him why you let a sick woman collapse in your store rather than sell medicine to someone who clearly needs it. I am sure Sheriff Parsons would find that real interesting, seeing as how his wife had a similar problem last year, and Dr. Hayes prescribed laudanum for it. Funny how you had no trouble selling it to her. The druggist's mouth opened and closed, and his flush deepened to an angry red. But after a long moment, he turned and yanked a brown bottle from the shelf behind him, slamming it on the counter hard enough to rattle the other medicines. $2. Vincent pulled coins from his pocket without counting them and dropped them on the counter. He took the bottle, uncorked it, and crouched back down beside Rose. This is going to taste awful, but it will help. Just a small amount now. He tipped a careful measure into the cap and held it to her lips. Rose swallowed it down, grimacing at the bitter taste, and within moments she felt the sharp edges of the pain begin to soften. It did not disappear entirely, but it became manageable, something she could breathe through rather than something that threatened to tear her apart from the inside. "Thank you," she whispered. "Can you stand?" Vincent asked. Rose nodded, though she was not entirely certain. Vincent helped her to her feet, his hands steady and respectful, and when she swayed he put an arm around her waist to support her weight. He smelled like leather and horse and summer dust, and Rose found herself leaning into that steadiness because she had been alone and afraid for so long. "Where are you staying?" Vincent asked as he guided her toward the door. "I am not," Rose said. "I was just passing through. I need to get to Fort Davis." Vincent stopped walking and looked down at her with an expression that suggested he thought she had lost her mind. "You are in no condition to ride anywhere. When was the last time you ate?" Rose tried to remember and could not. Yesterday morning, maybe. Or had it been the day before? The pain had stolen her appetite, and she had been rationing her supplies anyway, knowing she still had miles to go. "That is what I thought," Vincent said, interpreting her silence correctly. "Come on. Where are we going?" Rose asked as he steered her down the wooden sidewalk. "The hotel, so you can get a room and rest. Then I am going to get you some food, and we are going to figure out what to do about whatever is making you sick." "I cannot afford the hotel," Rose said, pride warring with desperation. "I only have enough money to get me to Fort Davis." "I will take care of it," Vincent said. "You do not even know me," Rose protested. "Why would you do this?" Vincent glanced down at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch despite the pain and exhaustion. "Because you need help, and I am not the kind of man who walks away from someone in trouble. Now hush and save your strength." The hotel was small but clean, and the woman behind the desk took one look at Rose and immediately produced a key without asking questions. Vincent helped Rose up the narrow stairs to a second-floor room that overlooked the main street, and Rose sank onto the bed with a sigh of relief that came from somewhere deep in her bones. She had been in the saddle for days, sleeping on the hard ground when she slept at all, and the mattress felt like heaven even though she knew it was probably stuffed with corn husks and not much softer than the earth. "Stay here," Vincent said. I will be back in a few minutes." He was gone before Rose could protest, and she lay back against the pillows, feeling the laudanum working through her system, dulling the worst of the pain to a manageable ache. Her eyes drifted closed, but she forced them open, afraid that if she fell asleep she might not wake up, that whatever was wrong inside her might finally win. Vincent returned with a tray from the restaurant down the street, beef stew and fresh bread and coffee so hot the steam curled up from the cup. Rose sat up slowly, and he set the tray on her lap, then dragged the room's single chair over to sit beside the bed. "Eat," he said simply. Rose did not realize how hungry she was until the first bite hit her tongue, and then she could not eat fast enough. The stew was rich and savory, the bread still warm, and the coffee strong enough to chase away some of the fog in her head. Vincent watched her eat with an expression that was part concern and part satisfaction, as if feeding her somehow made things right in a world that had gone badly wrong. "Thank you," Rose said when she finally set down the spoon, the bowl empty. "For everything. The medicine, the room, the food. I will pay you back when I get to Fort Davis. You can tell me what brought you out here alone and sick," Vincent said. "That will be payment enough." Rose hesitated, but something about the steady way he looked at her, without judgment or expectation, made the words come easier than they should have. "My parents died 2 years ago, cholera outbreak in San Antonio. I went to live with my aunt in El Paso, but she died last week. Heart gave out in her sleep. She was all I had left, and the people she owed money to made it clear I was not welcome to stay. My cousin Sarah lives in Fort Davis with her husband. I thought if I could get there, I would have somewhere to go. But then this pain started, and I think something inside me is bleeding, but I do not have money for a doctor and I just need to keep moving." Vincent's expression had grown darker as she spoke, his jaw tight. "You rode from El Paso like this?" "I did not have a choice," Rose said quietly. "What else was I supposed to do?" Vincent stood up and paced to the window, looking out at the street below. The sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. When he turned back to her, his face was set with determination. "The nearest doctor is in Fort Davis," he said. "That is a hard 2-day ride in good conditions, and you are not in good conditions. But I know the way, and I have 2 weeks before I need to be back at my brother's ranch. I will take you." "You cannot do that," Rose said, shaking her head even though the offer made something tight and fearful in her chest begin to unwind. "You have your own life, your own work. I cannot ask you to abandon everything to help a stranger." "You are not asking," Vincent pointed out. "I am offering. And my brother will understand. He married a woman who was in trouble once, and he would have my hide if I left you to manage this alone." Rose felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were not from pain. She had been alone for so long, carrying everything herself because there was no one else to help carry the weight, and the simple kindness of this stranger offering to share her burden was almost more than she could bear. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" Vincent came back to the chair and sat down, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "My mother got sick when I was 15, he said quietly. "Some kind of internal bleeding, same as what you are describing. My father was already dead, shot by rustlers, and we lived 2 days' ride from the nearest town. My older brother Thomas tried to get her to a doctor, but she died on the trail before we could reach help. I have always wondered if things might have been different if someone had helped us sooner, if we had not been so alone. I cannot change what happened to my mother, but I can help you. So let me." Rose reached out and touched his hand where it rested on his knee, her fingers pale against his sun-bronzed skin. "All right," she said. "Thank you." Something shifted in Vincent's eyes when she touched him, a flicker of warmth that softened the hard edges of his face. He turned his hand over and squeezed her fingers gently, carefully, as if she were something precious that might break. "Rest tonight," he said. "We will leave at first light. Take it slow and easy. Fort Davis has a real doctor, and he will know what to do." Rose nodded, exhaustion pulling at her like a riptide. The laudanum and the food had taken the worst of the edge off, but she could feel how fragile her body was, how close to breaking. Vincent stood and headed for the door, but Rose called out before he could leave. "Where will you sleep?" she asked. "I will get my own room," Vincent said, "or sleep in the stable with the horses. Do not worry about me." "Vincent," Rose said, and he paused with his hand on the doorknob. "What is your last name?" "Rourke," he said. "Vincent Rourke." "Rose Zimmerman," she replied. "And thank you, Vincent Rourke, for seeing me when no one else would." Vincent's expression softened into something that might have been the beginning of a smile. "Get some rest, Rose Zimmerman. We have a long ride ahead of us." He left, and Rose lay back against the pillows, listening to his footsteps fade down the hall. The pain was still there, a constant throb in her abdomen, but for the first time in days she felt something other than fear and desperation. She felt hope. Dawn came early, the sky turning from black to gray to pale blue streaked with pink. Rose woke to a soft knock on her door, and when she opened it, she found Vincent standing there with another tray of food, eggs and bacon and more coffee. Her body protested every movement as she sat up, the pain worse after a night of lying still, but the laudanum helped when Vincent measured out another careful dose. They ate together in companionable silence, and then Vincent helped her down to the street where he had 2 horses waiting. His own was a big bay gelding with intelligent eyes and a calm temperament, and he had procured a smaller mare for Rose, a pretty sorrel with white stockings. "This is Clementine," Vincent said, stroking the mare's neck. "She belongs to the hotel owner, but he is letting us borrow her. She has a smooth gait, should make the ride easier on you." Rose let Vincent help her into the saddle, his hand steadying her when the movement sent fresh pain lancing through her middle. She gritted her teeth and focused on breathing, on staying upright, on not falling apart when she had already come so far. They rode out of Marfa as the sun cleared the horizon, heading southeast toward Fort Davis. The landscape was harsh and beautiful in equal measure, all red earth and scrub brush and distant mountains that shimmered in the heat. Vincent set an easy pace, stopping frequently to let Rose rest and drink water from the canteens he had filled before they left town. "Tell me about your brother," Rose said during one of these stops, desperate for distraction from the constant ache in her body. They were sitting in the shade of a rock outcropping, and Vincent was rationing out some jerky and hardtack for their lunch. "Thomas is 8 years older than me," Vincent said. "He practically raised me after our parents died, built up a cattle ranch from nothing, married a woman named Clara who is tougher than most men I know. They have 3 kids now, 2 boys and a girl. I have been working as his foreman for the past 5 years, but I have been saving money to buy my own land someday. Maybe down near the Rio Grande, somewhere with good water." "That sounds like a good dream," Rose said softly. "What about you?" Vincent asked. "What did you do in El Paso?" "I worked as a seamstress," Rose said. "My mother taught me before she died. I am good with a needle, good with patterns. I was hoping I might find work in Fort Davis, help my cousin's family while I figure out what comes next, if I live long enough to figure anything out." "Do not talk like that," Vincent said sharply. "You are going to be fine. We will get you to the doctor, and he will fix whatever is wrong, and you will have plenty of time to figure out the rest of your life." Rose wanted to believe him, but the pain was getting worse despite the laudanum, and she could feel fever beginning to burn under her skin. She said nothing, though, not wanting to worry him more than he already was. They rode through the afternoon, and as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Rose felt herself starting to slip. The world took on a hazy quality, sounds and colors blurring together, and the pain in her abdomen had spread to her back and down her legs. She tried to hold on, tried to keep herself upright in the saddle, but her hands would not cooperate and her vision kept going dark at the edges. "Vincent," she said, and her voice sounded far away even to her own ears. He was beside her in an instant, swinging down from his horse and reaching up to steady her. "Rose, talk to me." "I cannot," she whispered. "I cannot stay up. Everything is wrong." Vincent cursed, low and vicious, and then he was lifting her down from the saddle, cradling her against his chest as if she weighed nothing at all. Rose tried to protest, tried to tell him she could walk, but her body had other ideas. Her legs buckled the moment he set her on her feet, and if he had not been holding her, she would have collapsed into the dust. "All right," Vincent said, his voice calm despite the urgency Rose could hear underneath. "All right, we are going to do this differently. Can you hold on to me?" Rose nodded, though she was not certain she could manage even that much. Vincent turned her carefully and crouched down, settling her onto his back with her arms around his neck and his hands hooked under her knees. Then he stood, carrying her weight as if she were a child, and started walking. "The horses," Rose mumbled against his shoulder. "I have the reins," Vincent said, and Rose realized dimly that he must have tied them together, leading both animals along behind them. "Just hold on. We will make camp soon, and tomorrow we will reach Fort Davis. I promise." Rose held on because she did not know what else to do, her face pressed against the warm strength of Vincent's back, listening to his steady breathing and the rhythmic sound of his boots on the packed earth. She must have drifted into unconsciousness, because the next thing she knew, it was twilight and Vincent was lowering her onto a bedroll beside a small fire. "Stay with me," he said, and there was something raw in his voice that cut through the fever haze. "Rose, you have to stay with me. Do not give up." "I am trying," Rose whispered. Vincent gave her more laudanum, more than he had before, and then he was pressing a damp cloth to her forehead, wiping away the sweat and dust. His hands were gentle but shaking slightly, and Rose realized with a start that he was afraid. For her. This man who barely knew her, who owed her nothing, was terrified that she might die out here under the stars. "Tell me something," Rose said, needing to hear his voice, needing something to anchor her to the world. "Like what?" Vincent asked, still wiping her face with careful attention. "Anything," Rose said. "Tell me about your land by the Rio Grande. What will you build there?" Vincent was quiet for a moment, and then he started talking, his voice low and soothing. "I will build a house first. Nothing fancy but solid, with a good roof and a porch where you can sit in the evenings and watch the sun set. There will be a barn for the horses and cattle, and maybe someday a garden if I can convince a woman to marry me and teach me how to grow things that are not just grass for the cows. I will have a few hands to help with the work, but not so many that it feels crowded. Just enough to build something good, something lasting." "It sounds beautiful," Rose murmured. "Maybe you could see it someday," Vincent said quietly. "When you are better, you could tell me if you think I should add a chicken coop or if that is too ambitious." Rose tried to smile, but the pain was too fierce. She reached for Vincent's hand instead, threading her fingers through his, and felt him squeeze back immediately. "I would like that," she said. "Then you have to fight," Vincent said fiercely. "You have to hold on until we get you to the doctor." "Promise me." "I promise," Rose whispered, and she meant it with everything she had left. The night passed in fragments, moments of clarity mixed with long stretches of nothing. Rose was aware of Vincent beside her, feeding the fire, giving her water, talking to her in that low, steady voice whenever she started to drift too far. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning to ride before he could walk properly, about the time Thomas got bit by a rattlesnake and nearly died before they could get the venom out. He told her about his mother's garden and how she used to sing while she worked, about his father's laugh and the way he could gentle the wildest horse. He told her everything, filling the darkness with memories and dreams, and Rose held on to his voice like a lifeline. When dawn came, Vincent did not even try to put Rose back on the horse. He packed up camp with efficient speed, then lifted her in his arms and started walking, leading the horses behind him. Rose tried to protest, tried to tell him he could not possibly carry her all the way to Fort Davis, but Vincent just shook his head. "Watch me," he said, and kept walking. The sun climbed higher, baking the earth and everyone on it, and still Vincent walked. Rose could feel the strain in his muscles, the way his breathing grew more labored as the miles passed, but he never faltered, never slowed. She dozed fitfully against his chest, waking occasionally to find them still moving, Vincent's face set in grim determination. "You can rest," Rose said during one of these waking moments. "Please, Vincent, you are going to collapse." "Not until we get there," Vincent said, and there was steel in his voice. "We are close now, I can make it." And he did. It was late afternoon when they finally crested a rise and saw Fort Davis spread out in the valley below, the old military fort and the town that had grown up around it. Vincent made a sound that might have been relief or exhaustion or both, and then he was moving faster, almost running despite the weight in his arms and the miles already behind him. People stopped to stare as Vincent carried Rose down the main street, but he ignored them all, heading straight for a building with a sign that read, "Dr. Hayes, Physician." He kicked the door open without ceremony and carried Rose inside, where a gray-haired man looked up from a desk covered in medical journals. "I need help," Vincent said, and his voice cracked on the words. "She is bleeding inside, has been for days. I gave her laudanum for the pain, but it is getting worse. Please." Dr. Hayes took one look at Rose's pale, fever-flushed face and was on his feet immediately. "Bring her to the examination room quickly now." Vincent carried Rose through a door into a small room with a padded table and more medical equipment than Rose had ever seen in one place. He laid her down as gently as if she were made of spun glass, and Rose caught his hand before he could step away. "Stay," she said. "I am not going anywhere," Vincent promised. Dr. Hayes was already examining her, his hands practiced and impersonal as he pressed against her abdomen, asked questions about the pain and the bleeding. Rose answered as best she could, but the fever was making everything fuzzy and strange. The doctor frowned, palpated different areas, and then nodded to himself as if confirming something. "How long have you been carrying her?" Dr. Hayes asked Vincent without looking up. "Since yesterday afternoon," Vincent said. "We were on horseback before that, riding from Marfa." "Is she going to be all right?" Dr. Hayes straightened and finally looked at Vincent, his expression grave. "She has an ovarian cyst that has ruptured. The bleeding is internal, which is why it has been so difficult to manage. Left untreated, it will kill her. I need to operate immediately, try to stop the bleeding and remove any damaged tissue. It is going to be risky, but it is her only chance." Rose felt fear spike through the fever, but Vincent squeezed her hand tighter. "Do what you have to do," he said. "I will pay whatever it costs." "You should wait outside," Dr. Hayes said, already moving to gather instruments and supplies. "This is not going to be pleasant to watch." "I am staying," Vincent said flatly. "I promised her I would not leave, and I keep my promises." Dr. Hayes studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well, but you will do exactly as I say when I say it. Understood. Yes, sir, Vincent said. The doctor gave Rose something stronger than laudanum, something that made the world go soft and distant. And then there was only pain and pressure and Vincent's voice cutting through it all, steady and sure, telling her she was going to be fine, that she just had to hold on a little longer, that he had her, and he was not letting go. Rose held on. She woke in a clean bed in a room she did not recognize, sunlight streaming through lace curtains and the smell of lavender in the air. For a long moment she just lay there, taking inventory of her body. The sharp, tearing pain was gone, replaced by a dull ache that felt almost manageable by comparison. Her abdomen was bandaged, and when she shifted slightly she could feel the pull of stitches, but she was alive. She was alive. Rose. She turned her head carefully and found Vincent sitting in a chair beside the bed, his hair disheveled, and dark circles under his eyes that suggested he had not slept in days. But he was smiling, a real smile that transformed his entire face, and Rose felt something warm and bright bloom in her chest. "You are awake," Vincent said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "Thank God. Dr. Hayes said you were going to be all right, but I needed to see it for myself." "What happened?" Rose asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. "The doctor operated on you 2 days ago," Vincent explained, leaning forward. "The cyst had ruptured like he thought, and you were bleeding pretty badly inside. He managed to stop it and remove the damaged tissue, said you were lucky we got here when we did. Another day and it might have been too late." 2 days, Rose said, shocked. "I have been unconscious for 2 days." "The doctor kept you sedated while your body healed," Vincent said. "You had a fever for a while, but it broke yesterday evening. He said you should make a full recovery, though you will need to rest for a few weeks." Rose felt tears slide down her temples and into her hair. "I thought I was going to die," she whispered. "Out there on the trail, I truly thought that was the end." "I know," Vincent said softly. He reached out and wiped the tears away with his thumb, his touch achingly gentle. "But you did not. You fought and you made it, and now you are going to get better." "Because of you," Rose said, catching his hand and holding it against her cheek. "Vincent, you saved my life. You carried me when I could not walk, you got me to the doctor, you stayed with me through the surgery. Why? Why would you do all of that for someone you did not even know?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his gray-green eyes searching her face. Then he said, "Because from the moment I saw you in that druggist's shop, something in me knew I could not walk away. I told myself it was just about helping someone in need, about doing the right thing. But somewhere between Marfa and here, between watching you fight through the pain and holding your hand while the doctor worked to save your life, it became about more than that. It became about you, Rose Zimmerman. About who you are, your strength and your stubbornness, and the way you kept going even when you had every reason to give up. I do not know how to explain it except to say that I could not let you die. The world needs you in it. I need you in it." Rose stared at him, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with fever or fear. "Vincent," she breathed. "You do not have to say anything," Vincent said quickly. "I know this is a lot and you have been through hell. I just needed you to know. I needed you to understand why I did what I did." "I need you to understand something too," Rose said, her voice stronger now. "I have been alone for so long, carrying everything by myself because I thought that was what strength looked like, but you showed me something different. You showed me that strength can also be accepting help, leaning on someone when you cannot stand on your own. You gave me that gift, Vincent Rourke, and I do not think I will ever be able to repay it. But I want to try. I want to know you, really know you. I want to hear more stories about your ranch and your dreams. I want to see that land by the Rio Grande. I want whatever this is between us to be real." Vincent's expression shifted into something incandescent. joy and relief and wonder all mixed together. He leaned down slowly, giving Rose plenty of time to pull away if she wanted, and pressed his forehead to hers. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, and Rose felt something settle into place inside her chest, something that felt like coming home. "It is real," Vincent said against her skin. "Rose, I promise you it is real." A soft knock on the door interrupted them, and Dr. Hayes entered with his medical bag. He took one look at them, Vincent's forehead pressed to Rose's and their hands clasped tightly together, and cleared his throat pointedly. "I see my patient is awake," he said with a hint of amusement. "That is excellent news. How are you feeling, Miss Zimmerman?" "Sore," Rose admitted, "but so much better than before. Thank you, Dr. Hayes. You saved my life." "I had help," Dr. Hayes said, glancing meaningfully at Vincent. "This young man refused to leave your side through the entire procedure, and he has barely slept since we finished. I had to threaten to have him forcibly removed just to get him to eat something. You can sleep now," Rose said to Vincent, squeezing his hand. "I am awake and I am not going anywhere." "I will sleep when I am dead," Vincent said stubbornly, but Rose could see the exhaustion pulling at him. "There is a bed in the next room," Dr. Hayes said. "Mr. Rourke, I insist you use it. Miss Zimmerman will be here when you wake up, I assure you. And she needs rest as well, which she will not get if she is worried about you collapsing from exhaustion." Vincent looked like he wanted to argue, but Rose gave him a stern look that surprised them both. "Go," she said. "Please, for me." That did it. Vincent nodded reluctantly and stood, though he did not let go of Rose's hand until the very last moment. "I will be right next door if you need anything," he said. "I know," Rose said, smiling despite her exhaustion. "Thank you, Vincent." He left, and Dr. Hayes examined Rose thoroughly, checking her stitches and her fever and asking detailed questions about her pain levels. Finally, he seemed satisfied and stepped back. "You were very fortunate," he said seriously. "Another few hours and we would have lost you. The rupture was severe and you had lost a significant amount of blood. You are going to need at least 3 weeks of bed rest before you can even think about getting up and moving around, and probably 2 months before you are fully recovered. Do you have somewhere to stay while you heal?" "My cousin Sarah lives here," Rose said. "Sarah Turner. She married a man named James, I think. I was trying to reach her when I got sick." Dr. Hayes's face lit up with recognition. "I know the Turners. Good people. James works at the livery stable and Sarah helps run the school. I will send word to them right away. I am sure they will be glad to know you are here." He was right. Within the hour, Sarah arrived in a flurry of skirts and tears, throwing her arms around Rose as carefully as she could manage while sobbing about how worried she had been when Rose did not arrive as expected. Sarah was a few years older than Rose, with the same dark hair and similar features, and seeing her felt like finding a piece of home that Rose had thought lost forever. "I am so sorry about your aunt," Sarah said, wiping her eyes. "When I got your letter saying you were coming, I was so excited. But when you did not show up, I feared the worst. Thank God that Cowboy found you and brought you here." "His name is Vincent," Rose said softly. "Vincent Rourke. And he did more than just find me, Sarah. He saved my life." Sarah studied Rose's face with the shrewd understanding of someone who had known her since childhood. "You care for him," she said, and it was not a question. "I do," Rose admitted. "Is that insane? I have known him less than a week." "Love does not follow a schedule," Sarah said with a gentle smile. "James and I knew each other 3 days before he proposed. When you know, you know. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Recover first," Rose said wryly, "and then figure out the rest." The next 3 weeks passed in a strange mixture of frustration and contentment. Rose chafed against the enforced bed rest, unused to being still when there was so much she wanted to do and see. But Vincent visited every day without fail, sometimes staying for hours, and those visits became the highlight of Rose's existence. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other in the way people do when they have nothing but time and interest. Vincent told her about working cattle drives, about the year he spent in Colorado trying his hand at silver mining, about the horse he had loved as a boy that died of colic when he was 14. Rose told him about growing up in San Antonio, about learning to sew from her mother, about the book of poetry her father used to read aloud on Sunday evenings. But they also talked about bigger things, important things. Vincent told her about his dreams for his ranch, and Rose found herself offering suggestions, imagining what it might be like to build something from nothing with someone who saw the world the way she did. Rose told him about her fears, about feeling adrift after losing everyone she loved, and Vincent promised her that she would never have to feel that alone again, not if he had anything to say about it. Sarah and her husband James welcomed Rose into their home once Dr. Hayes cleared her to leave his care, setting her up in a sunny room at the back of their modest house. James was a quiet, steady man who clearly adored his wife, and watching them together made Rose ache with longing for something she was only beginning to understand she wanted. Vincent came to dinner at the Turner house at least 3 times a week, and Sarah took great delight in watching the way he looked at Rose when he thought no one was paying attention. It was the look of a man who had found something precious and had no intention of ever letting it go. 6 weeks after the surgery, Dr. Hayes finally cleared Rose for normal activities, declaring her healed beyond his expectations. That evening, Vincent arrived at the Turner house with a bouquet of wildflowers that he must have ridden miles to find, and asked if Rose would take a walk with him. They strolled through Fort Davis as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, and ended up sitting on a bench outside the old fort. The desert stretched out before them, vast and beautiful and unforgiving, and Rose thought about how close she had come to dying out there, how different everything would be if Vincent had not walked into that druggist's shop. "I have to go back to my brother's ranch soon," Vincent said quietly. "I've been gone almost 2 months, and while Thomas understands, I have responsibilities there. But Rose, I do not want to go without knowing where we stand. These past weeks, getting to know you have been the best of my life. You are smart and funny and stronger than anyone I have ever met, and I find myself thinking about you every moment we are apart. I want more than this. I want a future with you if you will have me." Rose turned to face him, her heart full to bursting. "Vincent Rourke, are you asking me to marry you?" "Not yet," Vincent said with a crooked smile that made Rose's stomach flip. "I want to do this properly, court you the way you deserve, give you time to be sure this is what you want. But I am asking if you would be willing to let me try. To see where this goes. Because, Rose, I am already half in love with you, and I think if you give me a chance, I will be all the way there before too long." "Only half," Rose teased, but her voice was thick with emotion. "Vincent, I am already all the way there. I fell for you somewhere between Marfa and Fort Davis, between the laudanum and the carrying, and the way you refuse to let me give up. You say you want to court me properly, and I appreciate that. But I want you to know that when you do ask me to marry you, the answer is going to be yes." Vincent stared at her for a long moment, and then he was kissing her, his hands cradling her face as if she were something infinitely precious. Rose kissed him back with everything she had, pouring all of her gratitude and hope and love into the press of her lips against his. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard, and Vincent was smiling so wide it looked like it might split his face in two. "I love you, Rose Zimmerman," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you too, Vincent Rourke," Rose replied. And she had never meant anything more in her life. Vincent did go back to his brother's ranch, but he returned every 2 weeks without fail, riding the long miles from the northern ranch lands just to spend a few days in Fort Davis with Rose. On one of these visits, 4 months after they met, he brought a ring his mother had worn, a simple gold band with a small ruby, and asked Rose properly if she would marry him. She said yes before he even finished the question, and they were married in the Fort Davis church on a bright November morning in 1883, with Sarah as Rose's attendant and Vincent's brother Thomas standing up as his best man. Rose met Thomas and his wife Clara and their 3 children, and was welcomed into the Rourke family with open arms. Clara pulled Rose aside during the wedding celebration and told her that she had never seen Vincent look as happy as he did when he looked at Rose, and that she was grateful Rose had survived to be there. Vincent and Rose spent their first months of marriage at Thomas's ranch, with Rose helping Clara with the household work, and Vincent continuing his duties as foreman. But they were saving every penny, planning for the day when they could buy their own land and build the dream Vincent had described to Rose during that long, feverish night on the trail. That day came sooner than expected. In the spring of 1884, a parcel of land came up for sale near the Rio Grande, 200 acres with good water and grass, and a view that stretched all the way to the mountains. Vincent and Rose bought it with their combined savings and a loan from Thomas, and spent the next year building their house and barn, planting their garden, and acquiring a small herd of cattle. It was hard work, harder than anything Rose had done before, but she loved every moment of it. She loved the feel of the sun on her face and dirt under her fingernails, loved the way Vincent would stop whatever he was doing to kiss her when she brought him water at midday, loved the sense of building something that was entirely theirs. Their first son was born in the spring of 1885, a healthy boy with his father's gray-green eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Daniel, after Vincent's father, and Rose thought her heart might burst from how much love she felt watching Vincent hold their son for the first time, tears streaming down his face as he marveled at the tiny, perfect person they had created. The ranch grew steadily, and so did their family. A daughter named Lucy arrived 2 years after Daniel, followed by another son they named Matthew 3 years after that. The house expanded with the family, new rooms added as needed, and the garden that Rose had started flourished under her careful attention. Life was not always easy. There were droughts that killed cattle and storms that damaged buildings and years when money was tight enough that they went without new clothes or store-bought luxuries. But Vincent and Rose faced everything together, their love deepening with each challenge they overcame, each success they celebrated, each ordinary moment they shared. On their 10th anniversary, Vincent surprised Rose with a trip back to Fort Davis to visit Sarah and James and Dr. Hayes. They stayed at the same hotel where Vincent had gotten Rose a room all those years ago, and walked the same streets they had walked when Rose was still recovering. "You ever think about that day in the druggist's shop?" Rose asked as they sat on the bench outside the old fort, watching the sunset just as they had done so many times before. "About how different things would be if you had not been there." "All the time," Vincent admitted, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "But not because I wish things had gone differently, because I am grateful beyond words that I walked through that door when I did. Finding you, loving you, building this life together, it is more than I ever dreamed possible. You are more than I ever dreamed possible." Rose tilted her face up to kiss him, soft and sweet and full of 10 years of love. "You carried me when I could not walk," she said quietly. "And you have been carrying me ever since in all the ways that matter. I love you, Vincent Rourke, today, tomorrow, and always." "I love you too, Rose Rourke," Vincent said, holding her close. "Always." Years continued to pass, marked by the changing of seasons and the milestones of their children. Daniel grew into a tall, serious young man who had his father's way with horses and his mother's head for business. Lucy was bright and spirited, with a talent for drawing that reminded Rose of her own mother. Matthew was the youngest and wildest, always getting into some kind of trouble but with a heart as big as the Texas sky. Vincent and Rose watched their children grow with pride and occasional terror, guiding them as best they could while trying not to hold on too tight. They taught them about hard work and integrity, about the importance of helping those in need, about the kind of love that carries you through the darkest times. When Daniel was 20, he married a school teacher from Fort Stockton, and Vincent and Rose became grandparents to twin boys who were the image of their father. Lucy eventually married a lawyer from Austin, though she continued to draw and paint, selling her work to galleries throughout Texas. Matthew followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a skilled rancher who took over more and more of the daily operations as Vincent grew older. Rose expanded her original garden until it was famous throughout the county, and she taught classes to young women on everything from preserving vegetables to designing a layout that would thrive in the harsh climate. Vincent served on the local Cattlemen's Association and helped his neighbors through hard times the way Thomas had helped him, offering loans and advice and extra hands during Roundup. They became pillars of their community, the kind of people others looked to for wisdom and support. But more than that, they remained deeply, profoundly in love, still stealing kisses in the garden, still dancing in the kitchen when they thought no one was watching, still talking late into the night about dreams and memories and everything in between. On a warm evening in May of 1910, 27 years after they first met, Vincent and Rose sat on the porch of their house watching the sun set over the land they had built together. They were both in their 50s now, their faces lined with age and sun and laughter, but when they looked at each other, they still saw the young man who had refused to walk away and the young woman who had fought to survive. "You remember what you said to me that first night in Marfa?" Rose asked, her hand in Vincent's. "When you were describing this place, I said I wanted to build a house with a good porch where I could sit and watch the sunset," Vincent said, squeezing her fingers. "And that maybe someday I would convince a woman to marry me and teach me how to grow things." "I think I did all right on both counts." "Better than all right," Rose said, laughing. "You built something beautiful here, Vincent. We built something beautiful." "We did," Vincent agreed, pulling her close. "And it all started because a druggist refused to sell you laudanum, and I could not walk away from someone who needed help. Funny how life works out." "Not funny," Rose corrected gently. "Miraculous. We found each other when we both needed it most, and we built a life that exceeded every dream either of us ever had. That is not luck or coincidence, Vincent. That is love. The real lasting carry you through anything kind of love. The kind worth fighting for," Vincent said. "The kind worth living for," Rose added. They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon, and the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. Inside the house, they could hear their grandchildren playing, their laughter bright and free. The cattle lowed softly in the distance, and somewhere a night bird called. Vincent Rourke and Rose Rourke, who had started as strangers brought together by pain and desperation, had built something that would outlast them both. A legacy of love and hard work, of carrying each other through the difficult times and celebrating the good ones. Their children and grandchildren would remember the stories, would pass them down through generations, would tell about the day a cowboy walked into a druggist's shop and refused to let a sick woman fight alone. And when Vincent and Rose were finally gone, many years later, they were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their ranch, with a view of the Rio Grande and the mountains beyond. Their headstone was simple, just their names and the dates of their births and deaths, and underneath, a single line that captured everything they had been to each other. He carried me when I could not walk, and I loved him when he could not stand. Together, we built everything. It was a fitting epitaph for a love that had started with laudanum and desperation, and had grown into something that would echo through the ages, a testament to the power of refusing to walk away, of choosing to help, of loving with everything you have and trusting that love will carry you through. Vincent and Rose had lived that truth every day of their long lives together, and their story remained long after they were gone. A reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin in the most ordinary moments, when one person simply refuses to let another suffer alone.